Just think, if the U.S. had never fought the Revolutionary War, slavery would have been outlawed in 1833, and we'd have had socialized medicine in 1948. But hey, at least we've got all the guns, am I right?
Hey, poor! Hey, poor! Hey, poor! You don't have to be poor anymore! Jesus is here!
Quite an experience to live in fear, isn't it? That's what it is to be a slave.
Man, you are one twisted fuck. Nope. I'm just an ordinary guy with nothing to lose.
Greetings, fellow worker slaves, podcasting at 128 kilobits from the Fortress of Squalitude, not far from the Redneck Mecca. This is the Atheist in the Trailer Park podcast. I'm your host, Tucker. Professor Fuzznuts is presently standing beside me, debating if he wants to still play with buttons. Yes, it's a podcast hosted by a guy and his cats. Get over it. This is a new show episode, and it's just me this week because America's out of town due to a family emergency. I'm not sure of the details that America would be comfortable with me giving out. If you follow her on Facebook, you probably already know the story. I will say this, though. She was emotionally harmed by the actions of a family member in ways which are undeniably cruel. I'm at a loss for words to describe what happened without giving away any of the details. But it was even colder and more callous than when the manager at work came up to me after I said that I had to leave early to take Houdini to the vet and then asked me, "Can't it wait?" I try not to ask things of my listeners because if you're always asking for something, it loses its impact. But if you could go to the show's Facebook page and post messages of love and support for America, I'm sure she'd greatly appreciate it right now. She didn't post on Facebook for a day after it happened. I don't know why, whether she was upset or if she got put in Facebook jail, but I promise you the next time she's on, if she wants to talk about what happened, you'll get the full story. And I want to make a slight programming note, not that you'll necessarily notice it in the podcast, as it's not something that we do much of anyway, but it is something that I hope the rest of you will do as well. From now on, there's going to be almost no discussion of Trump's tweets. We won't ignore them if he posts something like announcing that we're going to war with another country, but things like his attacks on the MSNBC hosts that are all the rage right now, not gonna do it. Yeah, I know they're offensive, but the reason Trump remains popular with his base is the constant outrage he's able to generate by his tweets. Shut that down, and they have to start focusing on his lack of actual accomplishments. Keep getting enraged about his insulting tweets, and his base won't notice what little he's done. Additionally, I'm going to try and shape the politics segment of the show around things that are happening in Congress not related to Trump. So more on the efforts to wreck healthcare in this country and less on the Russian investigations. Didn't quite succeed that much this week, but we'll get to that later. You'll almost certainly be buried in news stories about Russia, but the various other events going on in the Capitol are probably going to get missed by most folks. A few more bits of housekeeping and then we'll get to the news. The first, and most exciting, I'm sure you'll agree, and probably you've already been able to guess, is that Buttons and Fuzznuts have now managed to become fast friends. The other morning, as I was leaving for work, Buttons managed to worm her way under my bedroom door and past the barricade I'd put up to keep her in, and proceeded to wander around contentedly in the kitchen. I didn't have time to try and figure something else out to keep her in my bedroom, so I just left the door closed. That way, if she needed a safe place to flee, she'd have it. When I got home from work, her and Fuzznuts were curled up together on the couch, staring at me sleepily. Yes, I did take a picture of it, and I will put it in the show notes. Since then, I've let Buttons have the run of the house, and I have to say that it's been pretty awesome. They play together a lot, but most important of all, I wasn't woken up at 4 o'clock in the goddamned morning by buttons jumping on my face. She doesn't seem to understand that I like to sleep in on the weekends. Now, however, this means I've got to get Fuzznuts fixed, Buttons vaccinated and spayed, and I should get her tested for FIV as there's no vaccine for it anymore. And if she's got it, then I have to keep her and Fuzznuts separated so he doesn't get infected. I also need to do this fairly soon. Fuzznuts has never had any idea of what he's supposed to do with a female, but given the way he's buried his nose in her butt, I think he's starting to figure it out, and if he's not snipped soon, he'll probably feel the need to mark his territory by spraying urine on everything. And I absolutely have to get Buttons fixed, because if she goes into heat, even if Fuzznuts has been denutted, she's going to be a pain in the ass to deal with. I know Fuzznuts' mother certainly was when she went into heat. I haven't checked with the vet to see what the current prices for doing all this will cost, but the last time I talked to him, the damage for a complete vaccination series and neutering was around $150. Yes, I know that there are places which can do it for less. Without a car, however, I can't get to them, and my only option is the vet's office located behind the trailer park. I will have a GoFundMe posted here in the next day or so to cover this and the cost of redoing my deck roof, and I'll have a link in the show notes for it. I know I said I don't like asking my listeners for stuff, and here I am asking something from them twice in the same episode. I'm pathetic, I admit that. Another bit of good news is that I happened to stumble across a YouTube video which shows how to build your own table saw in 10 minutes. It's not fancy, of course, but if I can actually do it, then it should be good enough for my purposes. Since I have a long holiday weekend, I'm going to try to put it together and see if it works. I have everything I need, I think. There's a potential issue with my skill saw, as it's missing a bolt, but I should be able to rig something up if I can't find the bolt. I will keep you posted. That will be my project probably for the 4th of July. What I mean by that is they were kind enough at work, I say kind, and you'll get why I'm not really convinced that it is kind here in a minute, to give us 4 days off. I get tomorrow, which is Monday, the 3rd off, and the 4th off. Now, the catch, because as with everything, there's a catch, is that since we're getting tomorrow off, when we come back to work on Wednesday, we have to put in 10-hour days for the rest of the week. So I have to get up at 3 o'clock in the goddamn morning, not 4. And the odds of me getting a ride to and from work are less than stellar with my having to leave at those times. So, because how they do overtime at Complete Shitheads Incorporated is you do an hour before your shift and an hour after your shift, rather than doing like lots of places do and have you stay 2 hours over. Granted, staying 2 hours over would make it harder for me to get a ride home, but I wouldn't have to get up at 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the goddamned morning, and well, that's a big deal. I wouldn't have to get up at 3 o'clock in the goddamned morning. It would also be slightly cooler as I walked home. But one of the things that this means is that next week's episode is just going to be me, because I'm going to have to record that episode here soon, and it being a holiday weekend, my being able to find a guest who could join me for an Apocrypha episode is pretty slim. So, I think that is all the stuff I have to go over. I will have the show notes aren't going to be up tonight. They will be up tomorrow. I have. It's 9 o'clock at night here now. I can get this posted and edited and posted tonight, but I won't be able to do the show notes if I edit and post. And tomorrow I am, since I'm off, going to be doing a bit of job hunting. So, and then, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. All right, let's get to the news.
All pay heed! The Lord Jehovah, has given unto you these 10 commandments for all to obey.
From Kentucky.com, we have Williamstown plans to reject Noah's Ark tax exemption request. The city of Williamstown plans to reject a request from the Ark Encounter claiming an exemption from a recently implemented safety assessment tax on the grounds that it is a religious entity, the Grant County News reports. The tax collects a 50-cent charge on tickets in admission-based businesses within the city of Williamstown and currently affects only 3 businesses: the Ark Encounter, Williamstown Family Fun Park, and Main Street Gardens. In April, the proprietors of a giant wooden Noah's Ark in Williamstown said they were blindsided by the tax and said they might consider raising ticket prices. The tax does not apply to nonprofit, religious, and charitable events and organizations. The city plans to use the revenue collected from the fee to fund upgraded emergency response equipment to better serve Williamstown's needs as a growing tourist destination. Hambones folks are arguing against the tax because while they're running the place as a for-profit entity, they're really a non-profit religious organization. Yeah, they're trying real hard to have their cake and eat it too. But remember, folks, the Ark's ticket sales are lower than what was projected thanks to us atheists, which means we're more powerful than God. Woohoo! This next story comes from thehill.com. Kentucky allows public schools to teach Bible classes. A new Kentucky law going into effect Thursday will allow Bible courses to be taught in public schools. Governor Matt Bevin signed the bill Tuesday, NBC News reported. But watchdog groups concerned about church and state separation fear the classes may cross the constitutional line and go from teaching to preaching. Oh, come on, guys. There's no may about it. They will. Right now, the language of the bill is very vague, and the Kentucky Department of Education has not yet put together a curriculum. Amber Duke of the Kentucky American Civil Liberties Union said, "The concern, though, is that you could have a curriculum that is constitutional and could be delivered in a manner that is not constitutional." Ding, 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 ding. The Bible class is meant to establish an elective social studies course on the Hebrew Scriptures, Old Testament of the Bible, the New Testament, or a combination of the Hebrew Scriptures and the New Testament of the Bible, according to the bill. No mention of the Quran, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, the various Diamond Sutras of the Buddhists. And I want to point out that right now, Kentucky is ranked 46th in the nation in terms of educational standings. Arkansas is 47. Louisiana is 48th. Mississippi is 49th. And West by God, Virginia is 50th. I can't imagine that this is going to do anything other than drive down Kentucky's educational rankings even farther. Oh, and in case you're wondering, Tennessee is 43rd. So we're better, but not by much. From theindependent.co.uk, we have South Africa outlaws single religion schools. Single religion schools have been outlawed in South Africa after a ruling at the Johannesburg High Court. Public schools may no longer promote themselves as subscribing to a single particular religion at the exclusion of others, the court ruled. The Organisé vir Godsdienst, I can't fucking pronounce it. I'm guessing that's the, damn, what the fuck? Afrikaners, that's the goddamn language that is sometimes spoken in South Africa. English version of the name is Organization for Religious Education and Democracy, or Oh God, brilliant, which fights against religious indoctrination through public schools in South Africa, welcomed the judgment. They said the judgment means public schools may not promote one specific religion and exclude others. Okay, I grew up in the 80s, and how I first learned about South Africa were all the various musicians announcing that they weren't going to play Sun City because of apartheid. Sun City was a luxury resort there that often had big-named acts as attractions. Do you know how surreal it is for me to read this story and realize that South Africa has their shit together better than we do at this point? Because Betsy DeVos wants to use public money for religious schools, and it seems like the Supreme Court is going to be okay with that on the basis of the Trinity Educational Center ruling. And if you haven't heard the episode of Opening Arguments where they talk about the ruling, it's worth listening to, as there's a shocking number of cock-ups that the court made with this ruling in regards to Trinity Lutheran getting the damned money. I'm not going to blather on about the ruling because, unlike Andrew Torres, I'm not a lawyer. I am, however, going to point out something that nobody else has mentioned in all the various discussions I've read about this, whether they be atheist podcasts, posts on Facebook, or news articles. If you think that the Trinity Lutheran Church is made up of a bunch of Lake Wobegon style folks who try to out-white Mormons, you're wrong. Lake Wobegon style Lutherans are members of the misnamed Evangelical Lutheran Churches of America, while Trinity, and yes, I did check this out before I did this episode, is a member of the Missouri Synod. This means that they are closer in their beliefs to Southern Baptists and hardline Catholics than they are Lutherans who find green jello and casseroles to be fine dining. So the money, if Trinity gets it, because the state only has enough money for 10 out of the 30 organizations which applied for it, is going to fire and brimstone types, not people who are slightly more reasonable in their beliefs.
Maybe it's a little early. Maybe the time is not quite yet. But those other worlds, promising untold opportunities, beckon. Silently, they orbit the sun, waiting.
This story comes from WashingtonPost.com. No, NASA is not hiding kidnapped children on Mars. I am disappointed. The situation for human beings on Mars is dire. And not just because the red planet's atmosphere is mostly carbon dioxide and the average temperature is minus 81 degrees Fahrenheit. There's also the issue of the child trafficking ring operating in secret on the planet 33.9 million miles from Earth, according to a guest on the Alex Jones show. We actually believe that there is a colony on Mars that is populated by children who were kidnapped and sent into space on a 20-year ride, Robert David Steele said Thursday during a winding conspiratorial dialogue with Jones about child victims of sex crimes. So that once they get to Mars, they have no alternative but to be slaves on the Mars colony. That's not the limit to the crazy that the guy said either. Pedophilia does not stop with sodomizing children, Steele said. It goes straight into terrorizing them to adrenalize their blood and then murdering them. It also includes murdering them so that they can have their bone marrow harvested as well as body parts. This is the original growth hormone, Jones said. Yes, it's an anti-aging thing, Steele replied. I'm not sure which is more appalling, that someone said this or that Alex Jones continues to have an audience in the millions. Seriously, this kind of batshittery is beyond the other stuff that he said. Like, Sandy Hook was a false flag operation or that 9/11 was an inside job. Those are at least somewhat possible. By that I mean, if you wanted to do something like those things today, you could do it. All they require is a bunch of amoral people to be involved. Granted, you'll never be able to keep such a thing secret for long, but it could be done. Sending hordes of kids to Mars as sex slaves? Even with captured alien technology, the idea makes no fucking sense. Seriously. Allow me to explain why. If we assume, for the sake of discussion, that faster-than-light travel is possible, this means that any aliens capable of doing such a thing, at the low end, would have to have the level of technology capable of turning the entire mass of Jupiter into energy. At the high-end estimate of how much energy a theoretical faster-than-light drive would take to move a starship, it could take as much as 3 times the mass of the sun or more. If you can control energies at that level of magnitude, then nothing we have could do anything against that. So, let's say that an alien spaceship crashed in Roswell, New Mexico back in 1947. The government managed to figure out how all of it worked. Unlikely, of course, but we'll go with it for now. And is able to use that technology to send people to Mars as easily as you go to the grocery store. Why wouldn't they just use that technology to take over the damn planet and do what they pleased with us? Somebody gets a bit uppity, and you can literally vaporize their entire city, county, state, province, country, continent, or whatever in the blink of an eye. But let's say that we're right about physics as we presently understand it, and there never is any way you can travel faster than light. In order to build something like a generational ship capable of crossing the galaxy, you need to have robust technologies far more advanced than what we have. Again, with those, you'd still be able to wipe out anyone who annoyed you as easily as you take a breath. If you're the kind of sick fuck who likes nothing better than raping little kids, what's to stop you from taking over the planet? Nothing. Although, I will point out that it is, let's say the whole adrenaline compounds or whatever, that it produces something in the blood of children that gives you anti-aging properties. Well, I'm arguing this for the sake so that I can point out how absurd all this is. Say that, you rape little kids, they get adrenaline in their blood, it creates some kind of change. Whatever that change is in their biology. We would know what it was. We would be able to figure that out easily enough. And we would be able to genetically engineer bacteria to produce those same compounds, so you ain't got to rape the kids and then siphon their blood out of them. And before you say, whoa, I don't think we have that kind of technology. We do. Because all the insulin used in the United States is developed by genetically engineering E. coli bacteria to produce insulin. There's also somebody out there who has plants that they grow where they've spliced insulin producing genes into the plants. They harvest the plants and then do some kind of process to them to extract the insulin out of them. The point being, you don't need to have a bunch of kids that you rape to get the adrenaline out of them and other compounds to have anti-aging effects. You could do this shit in a fucking lab with a petri dish for far fucking less than it cost to send somebody to Mars, as I will explain. I mean, let's dial it back a bit more and say that there's no alien technology involved at all. Just some super secret government technology. Fine. But for that to exist, it has to be able to operate at a cost far lower than what even SpaceX costs are. You have to be able to launch it from someplace where it's not going to be noticed. Big old rockets are pretty easy to notice when they go up. And you have to ensure that thousands of people involved in such an effort don't say anything. It's fucking impossible. According to Gene Kranz, who was flight director at NASA for decades, every manned launch from Apollo to the shuttle era had an incident which could have cost the life of the crew if things had gone just slightly differently. It's not just Apollo 13, Challenger, and Columbia which had problems. It was all of them. Now imagine that you're trying to do something which is an order of magnitude harder than going to the moon or low Earth orbit. Over half all the probes sent to Mars have failed. Presumably, you'd want a higher success rate if you're going to the trouble of sending sex slaves to that planet. And why would you send them to Mars anyways? Because you don't want them to talk? Why not just kill them and dump their bodies in the ocean? I don't care how cheap it is to send things to Mars. Bullets in a boat going a few miles out from the coast is going to be vastly cheaper and require fewer people. And that's one of the things which so irritated me about Kim Stanley Robinson's novels about Mars. In the books, and this is not a spoiler at all, the Mideast nations have all decided that they're sick of the Bedouin tribes going around and getting their footy prints all over the nice clean deserts. So the Mideast nations send the Bedouin to Mars to get rid of them. Forget the issues of sending people who don't have the kind of educational background to survive on another planet. Why would you spend so much fucking money to send them there? Mass killings of people are so cheap to do. Oh, you're worried about the trauma that it might inflict on your soldiers. Great news! That problem was cracked by Germany back in the 1940s. Worried about international opinion objecting to your actions? Hello! Considering all the shit that happens in the Mideast today, which the rest of the planet says almost nothing about, a little extra genocide isn't going to bother anyone. It's not like the Bedouins have any international lobby looking after them. I mean, can you name any of the various tribes which make up the Bedouin? Wikipedia has a partial listing of them, some 20 plus tribes, and I've not heard of any of them. If it was announced that the Saudis were exterminating the Harbs, would you know what that meant? Would our government care? Nope. And it wouldn't matter who was president at the time. The most we could expect is a minor public condemnation, if that, and then everyone would forget about it. But to people who listen to Alex Jones, it's either perfectly plausible or not so crazy as to make them want to stop watching or listening to him, because for them, it's easier to believe in such things than it is to add meaningful experiences to their dull little lives. This comes from io9.gizmodo.com. Buzz Aldrin's Toy Story joke hilariously soars over Trump's head. President Donald Trump signed an executive order Friday to revive the National Space Council, signifying a renewed, yet vague, focus on space exploration. Colonel Buzz Aldrin, the second man to walk on the moon, was there to witness the event. He tried to liven the room with a Buzz Lightyear quip, only to have Trump crash and burn on the landing pad. As you can see in the White House video, the exchange happens right as Trump is about to sit down to sign the executive order, which will put Vice President Mike Pence in charge of advising the president on space exploration. It's a little hard to make out what Trump says right as he opens the folder containing the executive order, and the White House transcript left those words out. But it sounded like, "We know what this is, space. That's all it has to say, space." Then to Aldrin he joked, "There's a lot of room out there, right?" Then this happens. Buzz Aldrin says, "Infinity and beyond." There's some laughter. Trump replies, "This is infinity here. It could be infinity. We don't really know, but it could be. It has to be something, but it could be infinity, right?" Not mentioned in the article, however, is that Buzz is a Republican and in the past supported the various calls for investigations into Benghazi. I won't say that he was a Trump supporter, but he certainly wasn't a fan of Hillary's. Two other things not mentioned in the article. The first is that while there were 4 astronauts at the ceremony, only 3 of them were mentioned by name. The 4th astronaut wasn't mentioned by Pence or Trump. Her name is Sandy Magnus. She's been in space 5 times, which is 3 more than Buzz, so failing to mention her is inexcusable. Granted, unlike Buzz, she wasn't the first person to piss on another planet, but, still, she was on the last shuttle flight, so think you ought to mention her. The second is that Buzz looks hugely uncomfortable to be there. I mean, like, you've gone home with someone that you've met in a bar, got to their house, spotted a human skin suit, a la Silence of the Lambs, and are trying to figure out how to get the fuck out of there before they murder you. Kind of uncomfortable. What will be interesting to see is if Buzz or the other astronauts show up at future White House events. I'm betting that at least some of them won't, but I could be wrong.
That was the most offensive science report I've ever heard. How could you do such a thing?
Beavis helped me.
This comes from sciencenews.org. Climate change could exacerbate economic inequalities in the U.S. Climate change may make the rich richer and the poor poorer in the United States. Oh, why does that not surprise me? Counties in the South face a higher risk of economic downturn due to climate change than their northern counterparts, a new computer simulation predicts. Because southern counties generally host poorer populations. Ha! Imagine that! The new findings, reported in the June 30th issue of Science, suggest that climate change will worsen existing wealth disparities. Oh, that is so promising for national stabilities. It's the most detailed and comprehensive study of effects of climate change in the United States, says Don Fullerton, an economist at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, who was not involved in the work. Nobody has ever even considered the effects of climate change on inequality. Oh, man, does that make me feel better? Researchers created a computer program called Seaglass that combined several climate simulations to forecast U.S. climate until 2100, assuming greenhouse gas emissions keep ramping up, which they are almost certainly poised to do in the U.S. at the very least. Then, using data from previous studies on how temperature and rainfall affect several economic factors, including crop yields, crime rates, and energy expenditures, Seaglass predicted how the economy of each of the 3,143 counties in the United States would fare. By the end of the century, some counties may see their gross domestic product decline by more than 20%, while others may actually experience more than a 10% increase in gross domestic product. There's a bit of a deficit there, guys. That could be a problem. This could make for the biggest transfer of wealth in U.S. history, says study co-author Solomon Hissang, an economist at the University of California, Berkeley. Oh, fuck. Bunch of damned liberals. But remember, according to Trump and his head of the EPA, Scott Pruitt, global warming is a myth and we have nothing to worry about. What a horrific charade our society is. We have the officials in the federal government saying that global warming is bullshit. Meanwhile, Republican mayors and governors are taking steps to deal with the problems that global warming is already causing in their areas. Yet do these same Republican mayors and governors speak out against Trump and his ilk in the federal government? Not really. And I'm sure all of them will endorse idiots like Mitch McConnell in the next election simply because they belong to the same political party. It's fucking madness, and future historians are going to describe this era the same way we describe the Dark Ages. From Gizmodo.com, we have this. The White House Science Division officially has 0 staff members. The purge of government employees that have scientific expertise continues. On Friday, the last 3 members of the White House's Office of Science and Technology Policy closed the door to their office for the final time. Science Division out. Mic drop, one of the employees tweeted. Clearly, American exceptionalism means that we're exceptionally stupid. There are presently thousands of jobs in the government that the Trump administration hasn't bothered to fill, and, well, one can make the argument that the government was overstaffed, letting positions at the White House Science Division or the State Department go unfilled is going to have severely negative repercussions for the country in the coming years, if not decades. I would much prefer a nation like the U.S., with all of its myriad flaws, be a world leader in things like technology than China. But that doesn't seem to be where we're headed. Maybe, however, we'll get lucky and India will take up the slack.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. Democracy simply doesn't work.
This comes from the New Civil Rights Movement.com. Gays for Trump holds rally in D.C. after Trump ignores entirety of Pride Month. Pride Month officially came to a close yesterday, and with it any chance that Donald Trump and his White House would bother to acknowledge the contributions and struggles of the LGBT community. But the president's decision to completely ignore Pride, even after marriage equality and the Pulse Massacre, didn't stop Gays for Trump from holding an event in Washington, D.C. today. Peter Boykin, the Gays for Trump founder and president of the North Carolina-based group, today held his Make America Great Again free speech rally, a reported alternative to his originally planned deplorable pre-4th of July picnic. Make America Great Again is more than just a political slogan, Boykin told the Washington Blade. It's a way of life. During the 2016 presidential campaign, then candidate Donald Trump sought desperately to position himself as pro-gay, pandering for the LGBT vote. I'm sorry, I don't remember any of this. But that's what the article says, so we'll just go with it. And lying to the American people about the Obama administration's policies on LGBT rights. Okay, the way I remember it, he lied and saying, like, we're all going to have to be gay. But whatever. Let's get back to the article. Donald Trump and his administration have since actively worked to dismantle Obama's pro-LGBT policies, arguably paving the way for the over 100 anti-LGBT bills in 20 states that have been introduced. I don't really have anything to add to this, other than it appears only about a dozen or so people showed up for the thing. How pathetic is your rally when you can't even get people to show up to point and laugh at how stupid you are? When I see the name Boykin, I am reminded of something which happened in my freshman year of college. And I'm going to be telling a bit of a tale from my youth. So feel free to skip it if you think that kind of shit's burrowing. Anyways, I'm a young, naive kid. This is probably October of my freshman year of college. Me and some friends I've met at school are out walking. Let me explain this shit. For some reason, and not all states do this, and not all universities do this, but one I went to did. As did the community college. For some fucking bizarre-ass reason, if you go to college here in Tennessee, and you take your courses, and it doesn't matter what you are, but whichever course you're whatever your major is or minor or whatever, they do it like this. You have one set of classes on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and another set of classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So, if you have, like, for example, your English class will meet on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for an hour. If you have your English class on Tuesdays and Thursdays, it'll meet for an hour and a half or 2 hours. Unless, of course, you have a class which is afternoon on Mondays and Wednesdays. Then there's a very good chance it will be an hour and a half class only on Mondays and Wednesdays and not on Fridays. Why the fuck you don't have your slated classes where it's like on you got your English class, you go to it Monday through Friday, and your other classes, you go Monday through Friday. I don't know, but that's the way they do it. Anyways, so we were freshman year of college, probably around October, somewhere around there. Still warm, and me and Rich and John, who I went to college with, and a few others, would spend our evenings, and when I say evenings, I mean late at night, 9, 10 o'clock at night, thereabouts, walking around the campus, just because we didn't have anything else to do. You're under the age of 21, can't go to a bar, there's not any activities for those folks who are 18 to 20 in the town, so, you know, what are you going to do? You're a freshman. You can go back to your dorm room and jerk off, but that's about it. So we would just walk around campus blathering and philosophizing. Well, bullshitting, because that's the kind of shit people do when they're at that age. And we stumbled across these people on the green of our campus. And there was this guy we got to talking to who was really supposedly into the whole pagan shit, whatever. Claimed he was a vampire. He wasn't a student at the university, but he would show up there. He was old enough to be a student, but for whatever reason he wasn't going. His name was Charles Boykin. And he was in a group talking with some friends that John and Rich knew. And for whatever reason, he latched on to John and Rich and I. I don't quite know why. Well, I can guess, but anyways. So we kind of walked around and talked with him after the group he was with broke up. And then John's like, hey, I got an 8 o'clock class tomorrow. I've got to go. Rich and I didn't, so we were like, yeah, we'll hang out for however long. Charles claimed that he had powers. And he could, depending on your wish, turn you into a werewolf, a witch, or a vampire. Now, as later came out, because Charles, Rich, John, and I all had a mutual friend, though we didn't know it, who was Bingo. And if you've heard the last episode, you know a bit about Bingo, because I ran into him at Asheville's Pride celebration. You know, and Charles was gay. Charles used the story of being, whatever the fuck he was, and I don't think he ever had a specific claim, to his paranormal abilities. He would use his claims of his paranormal abilities to have sex with people, because, obviously if you're going to want to be a vampire, a witch, or a werewolf, then, this can only be accomplished by practicing sex magic. Now, like I said, John's gone. Rich is incredibly naive when it comes to gay sex, or even what it means to be gay. I had some idea. Mind you, Bingo was the first openly gay person I knew, although I did know other people who were closeted in high school, and we all suspected, and later on discovered that they were in fact gay. But, so, I'm sort of dubious about the whole thing. I'm wandering around with Rich and listening to Charles tell his tales, and I'm exceedingly dubious of them, but I'm also like, I don't want to say you're the crazy person and have them go all ape shit and stab us or whatever. And I know I've told this story before on the podcast, but I'll mention it again. Rich was so naive about homosexuality that one time he was talking to me about John and Bingo, because John and Bingo later became a couple after this evening with Charles such. At this point in time, John wasn't open about being gay. But anyways, so Rich is telling me one time, he's like, you know, Bingo said to me that the other night, John just... And he does the gesture of somebody reaching down, grabbing a cock, and sucking on it. You know, he just reached down. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, he just reached down and sucked Bingo off. And I'm like, man, he also probably fucked him up the ass. What the fuck do you think gay people do? And Rich is like, I didn't know. I thought they just sat around and watched each other jerk off. And this is a guy who, you know, would rent pornos every week and, you know, especially went for the lesbian porn. So it's like, you know, you think lesbians lick box, but you don't think gay people suck cock? What the fuck is wrong with you? So, I see Boykin, and I think, God, I wonder if they're related. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But that's just the kind of random brain droppings you get from this podcast. And our next story comes from BusinessInsider.com. Kentucky Secretary of State. There's not enough bourbon here in Kentucky to justify White House request for voter info. Kentucky Secretary of State Allison Grimes sounded off on the Voter Fraud Commission in charge of investigating a claim by President Donald Trump that millions of illegal ballots were cast in the 2016 election. Grimes appeared on MSNBC Friday after her office rejected the Presidential Advisory Commission on Election Integrity's request for sensitive data on individual registered voters. The information, according to a letter the commission's vice chair, Chris Kobach, sent to all 50 states on Wednesday, would be placed in a national public database. There's not enough bourbon here in Kentucky to make this request seem sensible, Grimes said. The Kentucky Secretary of State said the information requested is something no American in their right mind would hand over, let alone hand over to President Trump, someone who likes to tweet 140 characters at a time. Now, she might be a Democrat, but even Republicans have told Kobach to pound sand. So far, half the states have refused, and even Kobach's home state of Kansas has said that they're not going to be turning over the information to the commission because it's a violation of state law. It's smoke and mirrors, people. We know it won't accomplish anything. The people in charge know it won't accomplish anything, but they're doing it because it enables Trump's base to thump their chest and wave their tiny dicks around and feel that they're bigger and badder than everyone else. It's insanity. And there are a considerable number of questions about the security of the website that all this information is supposed to be uploaded to. Man, that makes me feel so good. This comes from APnews.com. Former judge in Kentucky fighting sex charges. For years, as a Kentucky judge, Tim Nolan sat in judgment of others. Now he sits in jail, awaiting trial on explosive accusations. Boy, they really do Boy, they really do try to sensationalize this. By prosecutors that he snared 17 women and juveniles into having sex over a 7-year period by using money, drugs, and threats. The former judge's fall to accused sex offender has rocked northern Kentucky, where Nolan was a long fixture in political and legal circles in the suburban sprawl just across the Ohio River from Cincinnati. Today, he's in a jail cell in Kentucky's Campbell County poring over documents for his defense after a judge set a $750,000 bond. Must have been a Democratic judge. Calling him potentially a danger to the community. Nolan faces charges of human trafficking, rape, prostitution, witness tampering, and unlawful transaction with a minor. In all, he faces 20 felony and 2 misdemeanor counts, and more than 100 years in prison if convicted on all charges. In this day and age, it's hard to be shocked, but I was shocked when I heard this, said Stephen Walditzek, an attorney who has known Nolan for decades. Kentucky Attorney General Andy Beshear's office said the 17 alleged victims include 5 juveniles. Now, until this day in court, we've no real idea if he's guilty or not, though he certainly wouldn't be the first judge to do something like this. This guy is notable, however, for having been an official in Trump's Kentucky campaign organization. I also find it interesting that Kentucky's nutjob governor appointed this guy to the State Boxing and Wrestling Commission only to rescind the appointment before the guy was seated. That's potentially an indication that the governor knew something was wrong and pulled the appointment so he didn't wind up with egg on his face later on. We'll just have to see how this plays out. Now, for a bit of comedy. This comes from turn210.com. Sean Spicer fundraising event sponsored by Rhode Island GOP canceled. A reception and fundraiser that was scheduled for Sunday night, headlined by White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer, has been canceled. Spicer was set to be honored by the Rhode Island Republican Party at an undisclosed location at 6 p.m. Sunday. Really, guys? Undisclosed location? Rhode Island's a really small state. I'm fairly certain everybody would know where it was. In a statement to NBC 10, Rhode Island GOP Party Chairman Brandon Bell said that the fundraising event was sold out, but did not go into details to explain why it was canceled. Spicy's from Rhode Island, so that's why they wanted him there, and the tickets to the thing weren't cheap. They started out at $250 and went to over $1,000 for a private VIP reception. I'm not going to speculate on why they canceled the event. There's any number of reasons why this could have happened, and I'll just note that they've promised to reschedule it without giving a date for that to happen. You gotta wonder if it's actually going to happen.
That's it for this episode of The Atheist in the Trailer Park Podcast. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, as well as just about anywhere else podcasts can be found. Many of the episodes are also on YouTube. Follow the show on Twitter. @TParkAtheist is the show's Twitter handle. It's on Facebook at facebook.com/trailerparkatheist.com. If you happen to like the podcast, please rate it on iTunes. If you'd like to support the podcast, there's a donate button on the show notes page. You can support it via Patreon at patreon.com/TNTucker. Thanks for listening.
Say goodnight, Fuzz-Nuts.
All I know is this violates every canon of respectable broadcasting.
Damned cat.